Good day, everyone. We are here to present to you the assigned topic to us. We are the Group 2, but before that, we would like first to introduce to you the members of Group 2. We have Sir Jelmer A. Gomban. We have Ma'am Manuel Kimigitering. Yours truly, Mr. Isagani Musa. We have also Ma'am Lorena Pastorin. We have Sir Alfredo Maray Jr. and Ma'am Tammy Mulato. So today, the assigned topic to us are the following. The social learning to us are the following: the social learning theory, socio-constructivist theory, and the experiential learning theory. Let us first focus on the social learning theory that is actually proposed by Sir Albert Bandura. The social learning theory emphasizes the importance of observing, modeling, and imitating the behaviors, the attitudes, and emotional reactions of others. The social learning theory considered how both environmental and cognitive factors interact to influence the human learning behavior. In social learning theory, Albert Bandura agrees with the behavior of learning theories of classical conditioning and operant conditioning. However, he adds two important ideas. These are the mediating process occurs between stimuli and the responses, as well as behavior is learned from the environment through the process of observational learning. Children observe the people around them in various ways. In social society, children are surrounded by many influential models such as the parents within the family, the characters on children's TV, the friends within their peer group, and teachers at the school. These models provide example of behavior to observe and imitate, such as the masculinity, the femininity, the pro and anti-social actions of the child, where they actually imitate it from the model. Children usually pay attention to some of these people and encode their behavior. At a later time, they may imitate the behavior they observe. But there are a number of processes that make it more likely that a child will reproduce the behavior that its society deems appropriate for its gender. First, the child is more likely to attend and imitate those people it perceives as similar to itself. So that's why you will observe, as a father, you will observe that your son is actually imitating most of your action, the way on how you wear your shoes, the way on how you wear your clothes, the way on how you walk. Okay, your son actually imitated. And the same with your daughters. It's almost exactly the same. They also imitate the action of their mother. So it depends on to what type of model do a certain child is actually exposed. The second one, the people around the child will respond to the behavior it imitates with either a reinforcement or punishment. If a child imitates a model behavior and the consequences are rewarding, the child is likely to continue performing the behavior. So they always do that. They imitate everything that they observe. So if they observe that it is a reinforcement in order to improve themselves, so that's why they will continue that process. But if in case they observe that they will be punished because they imitate something that is not good for them, of course, they will not imitate it. It depends on how the parents or people will actually handle such situation. So there are four mediational processes proposed by Bandura. Number one is attention. Next one is retention, reproduction, and motivation. When we talk about attention, the individual needs to pay attention to the behavior and its consequences inform a mental representation of the behavior. For behavior to be imitated, it has to grab our attention. And that is exactly the same. We observe many behaviors on a daily basis, and many of these are not noteworthy. Attention is, therefore, extremely important in whether a behavior influences others imitating it. And when we talk about retention, how well the behavior is remembered. The behavior may be noticed, but it is not always remembered, which obviously prevent imitation. So observe that. It is important, therefore, that a memory of a behavior is formed to be performed later by the observer. And next one is reproduction. This is the ability to perform the behavior that the model has just demonstrated. We see much behavior on a daily basis that we would like to be able to imitate, but this is not always possible. We are limited by our physical ability, and for that reason, even if we wish to reproduce the behavior, we cannot. Next one is the motivation. Uh, the will to perform the behavior, the rewards and punishment that follow a behavior will be considered by the observer. If the perceived rewards outweigh the perceived cost, then the behavior will be more likely to be imitated by the observer. If the vicarious reinforcement is not seen to be important enough to the observer, then they will not imitate the behavior. So the social learning approach takes through the process into account and acknowledge the role that they play in deciding if the behavior is to be imitated or not. As such, the social learning theory actually provides a more comprehensive explanation of human learning by recognizing the role of mediational process. For example, in social learning theory, it is able to explain many more complex social behavior, such as the gender roles, the moral behavior, than models of learning based on simple reinforcement. However, although it can explain some quite complex behavior, it cannot adequately account for how we develop a whole range of behavior, including thought and feelings. We have a lot of cognitive control over our behavior just because we have had experiences of violence does not mean we have to reproduce such behavior. It is for this reason that Bandura modified this theory actually it was in 1986, and it was renamed into social learning theory, social cognitive theory, as a better description of how we learn from our social experiences. So from social learning theory, he renamed it into social cognitive theory. Some criticism in the social learning theory arise from their commitment to the environment as the chief influence of behavior. In social learning theory, let us be reminded that Albert Bandura agrees with the behaviorist learning theory of classical conditioning and operant conditioning. However, as I said before, he proposed another two important ideas, as I mentioned. Next topic. The next theory is the Socio-Constructivist theory that is actually proposed by Vygotsky. This theory, by which they states that the central idea of constructivism is that human learning is constructed and that learners build new knowledge upon the foundation of previous learning. Social constructivist theory can provide adult ESL students with the ability to construct their own meanings by critical thinking. Social constructivism is a learning perspective founded on the assumption that learning is focused on learners and promotes their active participation as they manage to construct their own knowledge depending on their own reality. So this theory, it also states that all human knowledge and development is the result of social interaction and language use, making it a shared rather than an individual experiences. So it is a shared experiences rather than individual experiences. It means to say a certain individual need first to interact with others in order for him to acquire the types of learning. And beyond learning, based on social collaboration in addition to experiences. So it is not only based on your own experiences, but instead it is actually the product of the social collaboration. In this way, it holds that individuals learn when working with others. The perspective of learning emphasizes on social cognition or learning through interaction with peers. So the knowledge construction that occurs by interacting and engaging with others. Uh, the learner learns through its representation. The construction of knowledge, although personal, is carried out in the social setting, not only on the individual experiences. So that's why in our classroom it's very important that we have that kind of activity. The context and come from the context and come from both what we think and what others bring as an interaction. In constructivist philosophy, they are actually stressing on the importance of social interaction in the construction of knowledge. So that's very important. And the third one, the next theory is the experiential learning theory. It is actually proposed by David Cole that according to this learning theory, the process whereby knowledge is created through the transformation of experiences. So experiences needs to be transformed. The knowledge results from the combination of grasping and transforming the experiences. So the learners need to grasp and need to transform that experiences in order for them to learn. The experiential theory proposed by Go takes a more holistic approach and emphasizes how experiences, including cognition, environmental factors, and emotion, influence the learning process. The experiential model has two ways of grasping experience according to Go, and that is abstract conceptualization, and the other one is the concrete experience. He also identified two ways of transforming experiences that is called as active experimentation and reflective observation. These four of modes of learning are often portrayed as a cycle. According to Cole, concrete experience provides information that serves as a basis for reflection. From this reflection, we will assimilate the information and form the abstract concept. Then, people use this concept to develop new theories about the world, which they then actively test. Through the testing of our ideas, we once again gather information through experience, cycling back to the beginning of the process. So the process does not necessarily begin with the experiences. However, instead, each person must choose which learning mode will work best based upon the specific situation. For example, let's imagine that you are going to learn how to drive a car. One person may choose to begin learning via reflection by observing other people how they drive. Another might prefer to start more abstractly by reading and analyzing a driving instruction book, or a different person could decide to just jump right in and get behind the seat of a car to practice driving on a test course. So that is the three theories assigned to us, and other topic will be continued to be discussed by my group mate. Thank you so much.
So I will be giving examples of how the theory of learning is observed in our classes. So as teachers, we want our students to be successful and to learn to the best of their ability. That's why we employ the best learning theory and activities tailored for our learners. First learning theory would be the social learning theory. The social learning theory, as explained earlier, can be used to encourage and teach desirable behaviors in classroom, and this is employed through the use of positive reinforcement and rewards. So for example, a student who is praised for raising their hand to speak will more than likely repeat that behavior. Additionally, other students will follow soon and raise their hands after observing that the behavior elicited a positive outcome. Conversely, the student who is reprimanded for an undesired behavior is less likely to repeat that behavior, as are their peers who will also wish to avoid the negative consequence of replicating the action. Second, use of engaging and level appropriate lessons. Ensuring that the lessons are level appropriate and as engaging as possible will help sustain the students' attention. Third, incorporating multisensory activities into the lesson. So incorporate as many different activities into our lesson as possible helps our students to retain information. And fourth, we do this through paired and group works. So learning also takes place through observing peers. Pairing a high ability student with a student that is struggling allows for peer coaching to occur. This is very useful as some students are often more likely to pay attention to their peers than to another adult. So one thing that the social learning theory does show us is that observation plays an important role in shaping the knowledge, behavior, and attitudes of our students. And for this reason, teachers need to be excellent role models and ensure that they are being inclusive, inspiring, and compassionate towards their students. Next theory would be the Socio-Constructivist theory. The Socio-Constructivist theory states that the social world develops out of the individual's interaction with their culture and society. Knowledge evolves through the process of social negotiation and evaluation of the viability of individual understanding. Here the teacher moves from being people who teach to being facilitators of learning. Social constructivism teaches that all knowledge develops as a result of social interaction and language use, and it results from many social processes and interactions. So the teachers should allow their students to come up with their own questions, make their own theories, and test them for viability. So we employ this through number one, reciprocal teaching and learning. This allows learners to teach one another. Second, we do inquiry-based learning, or the IBL, where the learners pose their own questions and seek answers to their questions via research and direct observation. They present their supporting evidence to answer the questions. They draw connections between their pre-existing knowledge and the knowledge they've acquired through the activity. And finally, they draw conclusions, highlight remaining gaps in knowledge, and develop plan for future investigation. Third, we also use this through problem-based learning, or the PBL. The main idea of the PBL is similar to the IBL. Learners acquire knowledge by devising a solution to a problem. This PBL differs from IBL in that the PBL activities provide students with real-world problems that require students to work together to devise a solution. As the group works through the challenging real-world problem, learners acquire communication and collaboration skills in addition to the knowledge. And fourth, through cooperative learning. With cooperative learning, the students work together in small groups to maximize their own and each other's learning. Cooperative learning it differs from typical group work in that it requires interdependence among group members to solve a problem or complete an assignment. So the social constructivism views learning as an active process where learners should learn to discover principles, concepts, and facts for themselves. So for the last theory assigned to us would be the examples for experiential learning theory. So this is learning by doing. The idea is that the best way to learn things is by actually having experiences. Those experiences then stick out in our mind and help us retain information and remember facts better. So we employ this through field trips, projects, scientific experiments, role play, journaling, immersion, and interactive classroom games. The experiential learning works in four stages. That would be concrete learning, reflective observation, abstract conceptualization, and active experimentation. Experiential learning helps learners learn new skills or become better at what they already know by doing, by reflecting, and then by applying. So, according to Aristotle, for the things we have to learn before we can do them, we learn by doing them. It has been true then, and it's true even now. So these are some of the examples that our group had been using to manifest theories of social learning theory, socio-constructivist theory, and the experiential learning theory. Thank you.
Hello everyone. My task is to discuss about the benefits, disadvantage, and limitations of social learning theory. I am Maria Lorena May P. Pastoril from Group 2.
The social learning theory, as discussed by my group mates, is one of many approaches that child development and educational scholars use to explain how children acquire knowledge. Spearheaded by researcher Albert Bandura, this view combines cognitive and behavioral approaches to learning. Although this is a commonly accepted theory, with strengths such as the belief that a child's negative behaviors can change with a change in her environment, it also comes with weaknesses. Now, based on previous studies, strengths and weaknesses of social learning theory can be broken down into two categories. The first one is positive reinforcement, and it means the action mimicked by the observer is a positive one. Therefore, the action may be rewarded, able, or commended by others. The second one is punishment, and it uses when the action mimicked by the observer is negative and may offend or harm others, thereby leading to a form of a punishment. Now, basically, according to the literature, the main strengths and weakness of social or observational learning depends on the model. So, according to this point, if the model is producing a behavior that is appropriate, responsible, and positive overall, the observer will mimic that positive good behavior. So, as for us educators, we need to be constantly aware of how we present ourselves and of our actions. One of the primary strengths of this theory is its flexibility to explain differences in a child's behavior or learning. The environmental or societal aspects of social learning theory says that children learn in a social context. This reinforces the idea that when there is a change in the child's environment, the child's behavior may change. For example, a child may have trouble following directions in a relaxed home environment, but have no problems with authority in a stricter school setting. On the other hand, when we talk about accountability, with a heavy emphasis on how the child's environment affects him and directs his learning, this theory is weak when it comes to the child's accountability for his own actions. Putting the focus on how setting influences behavior places more weight on the people and community that the child is part of, and not enough weight on how the child handles and processes new information. It neglects the child accountability and may go too far in stating that society directs how the individual behaves and acts. Yet, even though this theory focuses on gaining knowledge and acquiring behaviors through environmental influences, one of its strengths is that there are multiple modes of learning. Like Bandura himself noted that individuals can learn through direct experiences or through observations. For example, a child can learn the social norms of polite communications, such as give and take within a conversation, by actually talking with others or by watching other children and adults talk to each other. But unlike stage models of child development, social learning theory doesn't hinge upon a distinct progression of learning and growth that is chronological or age dependent. Now, the view of this theory as neglecting to consider the child's development across all of the domains is a potential weakness. Although not every child matures at an identical rate, some of the standards, milestones, and markers may still occur regardless of the environmental setting. Now, some researchers, based on their findings, reported some limitations for social learning theory, just like first, not a fully systemized or unified theory or loosely organized. There are also few controversials, like is reinforcement necessary for both learning and performance? Is self efficacy just another outcome expectancy? Or why are some self efficacy expectancies stable and others are susceptible to rapid change? Now, why some self efficacy beliefs apparently unrelated to behavior, for example, stop smoking. It relies on self reports excessively. Third, there are also neglected areas, just like as I mentioned a while ago, that maturation and changes over the lifespan ignored, and there are minimal attention to motivation, conflict, and emotions. Fourth, findings are preliminary. Our cognitive processes as the basic concepts of personality or our modeling and guided participation are able to handle many psychological problems. So, therefore, the social learning theories have often been called a bridge between behaviorist learning theories and cognitive learning theories because they encompass attention, memory, and motivation. So, it is also placed a heavy focus on cognitive concepts.
Good afternoon. Good evening, ma'am. Good evening, classmates. I am the next reporter for Group 2, Social Learning Theory, Socio-Constructivist Theory, Experiential Learning Theory. For this, we are assigned for the benefits, limitations, and disadvantages of the said learning theories. First, in the socio-constructivist theory, limitations. Started with the limitations. So, the learner needs much more time for the construction process since time is used in a flexible way. Both the educator and learner are required to make a lot of preparations. So, in this theory, limited preparations, the teachers needs there is limited preparations for the teaching and learning process. So, according to Faris in 1996. So, constructivism is a method that is quite difficult to apply in a traditional teaching learning process. So, that is socio-constructivist theory, the limitations. Next is the disadvantages of social learning theory. What are these disadvantages of social learning theory. First is the inner conflict. Since social learning is based on the idea of adopting what is perceived as successful and positive behavior in others, you are learning to have more likely someone else. If you use this tactic too often and too intensely, it can result in inner conflict if the new behaviors are contrary to your own views. In the long run, this leads to active internal resistance and prevents any learning process. For less authenticity, contrary to what behavioral scientists have feared, social learning does not necessarily affect a person's personality. In most cases, it would take long-term repeated imitation to adopt a new behavior as one's own or lose one's connection to one's personality. Moreover, people often notice it themselves when something doesn't feel authentic. Loss of innovation. Personal thought processes, opinions, and views are often neglected, favoring behavior that promises the greatest success. But however, since new and unconditional ideas tend to bring progress and innovation, this learning technique should not be used too much. Next is the unexpected obstacles. Very few people know their limits, strengths, and weaknesses really well. It is often not possible to imitate the behavior of others because unknown obstacles can arise. This can result in frustration, which leads to resignation. Next is the consequences for self-esteem. Most people cannot tell the difference between observation or imitation and a comparison to themselves. If we compare ourselves with others, we usually compare visible indicators like performance and results. This leads to frustration and disappointment in most cases. We typically compare ourselves to people who can do something better than us in order to learn from them. As a result, such a comparison will always be to our disadvantage. For people without a solid self-esteem, such a thing can have psychological consequences in the long run. Therefore, care should be taken to distinguish social learning from personal comparison clearly and to incorporate positive reinforcement. Number 6 is the self-doubt. If everyone is a teacher and a student simultaneously, there is uncertainty about quality standards and there can be self-doubt. Next is measuring requires modern solutions. There are few ways to measure social learning apart from content usage unless you use a modern learning platform. Negative assumptions. Social media and videos are considered a waste of time and leisure time in many minds. So, negative assumptions with regards to the social media, especially now that students and teachers are using social media. Necessary intervention. Group discussions need to be led because otherwise they quickly disgrace and turn into random private conversations, losing focus on the topics at hand. So, this needs a necessary intervention in the teaching learning process. Next trick is the requirements. Attention, retention, replicability, and motivation must be present in each participant for it to work. So those are the advantages of social learning theory. Next, we have the advantages of socio-constructivist learning theory. There are also some disadvantages to constructivism teaching. The training necessary for constructive teaching is extensive and often requires costly long-term professional development. This may be unreasonable for school budgets as well as disruptive to the students' learning, with an average number of students in one classroom. Teachers are unable to customize the curriculum to each student as their prior knowledge will vary. The constructivism curriculum also eliminates standardized testing and grades. This eliminates grade-centered goals and rewards as well as the comparison of student statewide or district-specific progress. The disadvantages of experiential learning theory. First, it requires patience and guidance. Experiential learning requires patience and guidance. Students need to try and experiment with various methods that require time and patience. Meanwhile, results of this remain for a longer time. So we need time in the experiential learning for the student to be ready. A decentralized process. Experiential learning is considered a decentralized process as students can access any data and information and can submit assignments on projects at the same online platform. Two, faculties cannot access it using a traditional mode, especially now that mostly of our uh, teachers did not know how to use social media platforms. So there is a disadvantages with regards to experiential learning theory, especially in a decentralized process. Thank you.
So Sir Gilmer Gumban and I will be discussing about the specific evidence that the Philippine K-12 science curriculum involves and encourages the utility of the learning theory, specifically the assigned tasks for Group 2, which are the social learning theories, the socio-constructivist theory, and experiential learning theory. We all know that our science conceptual frameworks anchors with the different learning theories and approaches. So these theories and approaches are very helpful in aiming the visions of science, which is to create a scientific, technological, and environmental literate individuals. So namely, it was mentioned here, the constructivism, social cognition, learning model, learning style theory, and other theories. So these theories are very helpful in developing scientific literate among leaders, and especially to our learners, that will prepare them to be informed and participative, who are able to make judgment and decisions regarding the applications of science knowledge, and they have also the social skills. And these different theories are actually a learner-centered. Why? Because students estimate new ideas and conceptions using the terms of their previous notions as they consider the new situation. And also, these approaches and theories engages the teachers and students in active construction of knowledge. So different evidences will be discussed by Sir Chelmer. Sir Chelmer, come in.
To continue with the specific evidences, science curriculum uses 7Es model based on Depth and Order number 42 series of 2016. It is all about policy guidelines on daily lesson preparation for the K-12 basic education program. DO number 42 series of 2016 encourages science teachers to use the 7Es teaching plan. What are the evidences? In social learning theory, modeling and demonstration activities are evident. The teachers are actually using models and demonstrations, and then the students are expected to demonstrate the skills or activities. Next, in socio-constructivist theory, cooperative and collaborative activities are also there, in which students are expected to work in groups and experience learning within the group. And lastly, on experiential learning theory, there is actual manipulation of the devices and real-life experience of experiments and activities. In science curriculum, students are expected to get and learn the information first-handedly, meaning they are given authentic or real-life experiences. With those information, I hope you have learned about the three learning theories, namely social learning theory, social constructivist theory, and experiential learning theory. Thank you very much for listening.